All right, let's get right into it. You know that feeling, right? That constant background hum of being me? The voice in your head, the sense that you are a single, continuous person? It feels so solid, so real. But what if it isn't? What if that self is more like a pattern the brain is constantly running? A process rather than a thing? Well, some incredible new science is letting us peek behind the curtain, and honestly, it's changing everything we thought we knew about who we are. And look, this isn't just some philosophical thought experiment. People have been reporting this for years in really extreme situations. Think about astronauts. They talk about this thing called the overview effect. They're up there looking down at Earth, and suddenly that hard line between me and everything else just softens. They feel this profound sense of connection. And you get the same thing with deep-sea explorers. They call it the underview effect. In both cases, this incredible vastness they're seeing seems to just dissolve the boundary of the self for a moment. So that begs the really big question, doesn't it? If our sense of who we are can flex and even dissolve like that, what in the world is it? And how could you even begin to study something so personal and so slippery in a scientific lab? Well, for the very first time, we actually have the tools to do exactly that. Researchers are now using things like DMT to essentially temporarily loosen the brain's grip on its normal self-pattern. This lets them watch in real time as that system breaks down and then comes back together. It's pretty wild. We're literally getting to see the me network in action. The key to understanding this is something called alpha waves. Now, these waves aren't the self itself, not at all. Think of them more like the brain's idling rhythm. It's this steady electrical hum that's always on in the background, kind of holding everything together and helping maintain that coherent feeling of you from one moment to the next. So check this out. In a recent study, scientists watched what happened to this alpha rhythm when people were on DMT. And this chart says it all. In our normal everyday state, the coordination of these alpha waves is super high. The brain is working hard to keep that me story running smoothly. But under DMT, that coordination just plummets. The organizing hum that holds the self together gets way, way quieter. And here is the absolute kicker. This wasn't just some random brain signal. The researchers found a direct one-to-one connection. The more that the alpha rhythm died down, the more powerfully people reported the feeling of their individual self just dissolving. For the first time, we can actually see the biological signature of that profound experience. But, and this is a really important but, we have to be careful with our words here. This process isn't about the self being deleted or totally erased. The reality is actually a lot more nuanced and, frankly, way more interesting. It's all about reorganization. The philosopher Dan Zahavi puts it perfectly. Your self isn't just one single thing. It's made up of layers. Your body awareness, your personal story, your immediate experience. What neuroscience is showing us isn't the destruction of all that. It's a temporary reshuffling of how those layers are organized and how they talk to each other. So let's put these two ideas side by side. The popular term you always hear is ego death, which sounds super dramatic, right? Like the self just gets completely wiped out. But what the science is pointing to is more like ego reorganization. It's not about vanishing, it's about the structure of the self becoming temporarily more flexible and fluid. Okay, so what? Why does this matter? Well, this idea of a flexible self has some really huge implications for how we live. I mean, if the me we spend so much time and energy protecting is actually way more fluid than we think, could that change how we approach one of the biggest human challenges there is? Our own mortality? To dig into this, researchers studied a group of people who had tons of experience with ayahuasca, which is a traditional psychedelic brew. And when I say experience, I mean it. On average, the people in this group had used it over 50 times. They then compared this group to people who had never tried psychedelics. And the findings were pretty amazing. The long-term ayahuasca users reported way less fear and anxiety around the idea of death. They didn't avoid the topic as much. And here's the key thing. They reported feeling much more at ease with the whole idea of impermanence itself, the fact that everything eventually comes to an end. Now, we have to put on our scientist hats for a second. It is super important to note, as Professor Jeff Greenberg points out, that these studies just show a link, a correlation. They don't prove that the ayahuasca caused this change in perspective. It's a really compelling connection for sure, but we need more research to say anything definitive. This all leads to maybe the most interesting part of the whole thing. How is this happening? What's the actual mechanism that seems to be dialing down the fear of death? Because the answer is probably not what you're thinking.
You might assume that people just adopt some comforting new spiritual belief, right? Like a story about the afterlife or reincarnation, but that's not what the study found. The biggest factor wasn't adopting a new belief, it was developing what the researchers called acceptance of impermanence. It was less about what they thought and more about developing a new, more flexible emotional relationship with change and uncertainty itself. To actually see this kind of acceptance in the brain, another group of scientists came up with this really clever experiment. Basically, they'd flash words on a screen, some of them being death-related, like funeral, right after flashing a picture of the participant's own face. And while this was happening, they were measuring the brain's automatic surprise signal, which is like a little neural flinch when something unexpected happens. And the results are just fascinating. In the regular control group, when their own face was paired with a death word, their brain automatically suppressed that surprise signal. It's like a subconscious defense mechanism, a way of filtering out the thought, hey, wait, that applies to me. But the brains of long-term meditators, they didn't do that. They processed the signal directly, without that reflexive flinch. Their brains just showed less of an automatic defense against the idea of their own end. So let's zoom out. When you take all of this, the brainwave data, the psychedelic research, the meditation studies, and you put it all together, you start to see this really powerful new picture of who and what we are. And here's the bottom line. The self, that sense of me, isn't some static object you need to find or protect, like a jewel in your head. It's an active, ongoing process that your brain is constantly running. It's something to be witnessed, not just clutched onto.
And this brings us right back to the beginning. This quote from Dr. Yair Dor-Zerdeman, one of the researchers, just nails it. This acceptance of change isn't about learning a new philosophy. It's about developing an emotional stance, a new way of feeling about change, a new way of relating to the constant ebb and flow of life without instinctively recoiling from it.
So that really leaves us with one final thought to walk away with. If that solid you that you've always known is actually more of a flexible, changing process than a fixed monument, well, how might that change the way you live your life?